My why is because I believe every single person deserves to be heard. That every single person has greatness within them.
Hello, I'm Kate McKay, and welcome back to another episode of Master Your Life, a podcast dedicated to people's stories of grit, determination, challenges, failures, and then ultimately our discovery into our greatest calling, why we're here and who we're here to serve. And I love this stuff. And so I'm really grateful to introduce my guest for today, Catherine Lang-Cline. Catherine, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Me too. So, Catherine is an award-winning CEO and business leader who currently serves as an advisor, mentor, host of the podcast, The Secret Art of Business. And she is in the midst of putting together through the hot process of creating her thesis, her book that she looks to help other people serve at the highest level and help with their mindset is a big part for you, certainly. Yes.
Absolutely, because I think in most cases we are our worst enemy when it comes to getting ahead because we fall back on what other people have told us, how we were brought up. I think I have enough. Just so many things get in our way. And my question always is, why not me? Why not try and see how far I can go?
That's great. So who birthed that will in you? Do you think you came out of the box like that, Catherine, with that level of confidence?
I think I did because I was always a bit of the weird one growing up in that I was born in a small town with, blue collar parents. And I always had this, why can't we do more, get more, earn more sort of mentality? Why can't we want these things? And what happened is that I got very scrappy and clever as far as figuring out how to make things happen. Like, for example, we couldn't afford the latest fashion. But what I could do is I could go to the garage sale and buy a cool pair of pants and then learn how to sew the hem. So I could have some cool clothes. So it was a lot of problem solving, even at a young age, just to really figure out how can I keep leveling up, if you will, regardless of what everybody else around me was thinking. This, why isn't this good enough, and why are you like this sort of thing?
Right, with the big question mark. So what do you think fueled that?
You know what? I really don't know. I think part of it is because I was born very much a creative person. And it's now being referred to as being a visionary mentality, where you can always see something greater and you just got to figure out how to get to it. And sometimes it's incorporating other people to help you. Sometimes it's just figuring out how to do it yourself. But even at a very young age, I would just construct things out of cardboard, and I would make things, and I would paint things, and I would just create these worlds that were different than where I was, just because where I was not exciting enough. I could always see more. And then I had the opportunity, with the help of my grandmother, to get put into private school. And the private school kids definitely showed me what was all possible in the world. And I figured if they could have it, why can't I have it? And how can I figure out how to get it? Again, it was me just engaging that problem solving, visionary sort of mentality and just going through the process of figuring out, all right, I'm here. How do I get there?
That's so great. I know the faith of your grandmother. It's same thing happened to me. Interestingly enough, is that I was a junior going into my junior year of high school. My mom said, "Oh no, Katie's going to do this," and so I got sent off to private performing arts high school, and it absolutely changed the trajectory of my life in a very humbling way. How was that experience for you when you first entered the school, when you thought you were all that in a bag of chips, and then you're coming into an environment where everyone thought they were that in a bag of chips in some ways?
I was miserable for a lot of reasons. One, you have to wear a uniform, and being a creative person, that was just, putting on a prison suit. I did not match everybody else because everybody else, was very heavy into sports. They just had, all had new cars, and and I was just like the poor kid that had the luck of showing up at this place. So it took me a long time to fit in, and they knew that I was just that weird art kid and never really fit in. But I was just like, you know what, if I can just get through this, I can get to college. And then I put myself through college because my parents couldn't help me with that. So I just figured out a way to do it with a lot of work and filling out a lot of grants and loans. But I knew that was the key to making that big change and how to, again, get to the next level and what I thought the possibilities were for me. But yeah, I counted the days getting through middle school and and high school because it was not a good fit for me.
Yeah, isn't it incredible? Right. It's incredible. I have a question for you. I'm curious about this only because this is a newer revelation for me as I write my book as well. And that is much of my success was determined by what I didn't want. Oh, that is not enough, or that's just a no. I don't know what the yes is, but I know what my no is. I'm curious about your hearing that. What does that bring up for you?
I would say 100%. And that I think came from just me being very focused on what I did want. And things would pop up along the side and just, okay, don't even focus on that. Don't even focus on that because that's not part of that long-term vision for me. And like I said, back in the late 80s, 90s and things like that, when my career was taking shape, I mean, talk like this was, nobody ever talked about what's your vision? What's your long-term plan and things like that. Literally, I think my grandmother sent me to private Catholic school to find a husband and was very disappointed when I did not. And when I said I wanted to go to college, that too was like, oh, I thought you were going to get married and just live in town. And I'm like, no, I got bigger plans. And a lot of my family just couldn't wrap their head around that. And a lot of things were, like I said, were just thrown along the wayside. And I will say, too, that my ambition did backfire. So we do have some struggles along the way because I also married somebody who I thought was very ambitious. And he ended up being not the perfect fit. And yeah, so that was a little bit of a fire that I had to walk through to get where I needed to go. But
Well, he was familiar in some ways, right? It's like the choices that we make. There were parts of him that appeared to be what you thought, right? And then, but
yes.
we
Oh,
only
oh God, yeah.
are, yeah, we only are what we came through and what we know. So a lot of times it's
Exactly. And a lot of the things that, he was, basically he was obviously being himself, but it was a lot of things that I was really familiar with as far as my upbringing. And but again, it was like just being thrown in a prison again. And I had to decide after a long decision, yeah, I can't do this anymore because this can't be the rest of my life. I have more that I want to do and I had to end it.
Yeah. So what you do then the whole idea of definitely not this, and I know
Yeah.
I'm here for more. Definitely not this. Now let me negotiate and figure out how do I get out of this in front of me.
Exactly. I am not going to be just a wife. Like what it was. I am not the damsel in distress that needs to be rescued. I can move way, way beyond this. And I grabbed my own sword and had to fight my own fights. Yeah, exactly that.
Yes. And so how did you define success then? And maybe how is success different now? You've had massive success, which we'll absolutely get into, but what was maybe your first vision of success and what that looked like for you, and how is that now?
Back then, my vision was you had a well-paying career and you had a big house and you had nice cars and you had lots of things. And after a while, I got to the point where I was like, you know what, if I just walk away from everything and started over, I think I would be really happy. And it was not about the things in the cars and the houses and all that sort of stuff. And from that point on, changed up everything and really just got the things that were important to me. And so that changed in that I started doing things the way, like my career was how I wanted to structure it. It was not this constant climbing of the corporate ladder and doing what I'm being told in order to get ahead, that sort of thing. It was like, you know what, I'm going to freelance because at the time I was into marketing. I'm going to freelance, then maybe I'll work, then I'll freelance and work. And my ex really hated that. He was like, you always got to, because his definition of ambition was climbing that ladder. You got to get to the next level. And I thought for the longest time, well, if I could be the art director with a corner office, then that would be success. It ended up not being that at all. What ended up is as I was slowly going back and forth in and out of jobs, I stumbled upon an idea for starting a business. And then I got to run the whole show. So the success was totally my direction, totally my choice. And all the mistakes were mine, all the successes were mine. I worked obviously with a business partner. If people want to read my bio, and she was absolutely priceless in making all this happen too. But that's where I needed to be. That was success. It was creating something of my very own, which from birth, again, I was just making stuff out of nothing, and finally got this ultimate challenge to just have that freedom, just to have that challenge, just to have that choice of doing something, I don't know, epic.
That's so awesome. So what is it is a strange question, but what is your favorite failure? If you were to describe something in your life that you would say, oh yeah, that was my favorite. However you would describe that.
Oh my gosh. As much as I can say about my first marriage, that was my most epic failure for a lot of different reasons. But I got to tell you, when people go through stuff like that, here's what I tell everybody is that if I didn't do that and walk through that fire, I would not be where I am right now. And I would not have met my now husband. I would not have met my business partner. I would not have started a business. I would not have now have a daughter. All of that would never have happened if I did not walk through that first failure of a fire right. to get where I needed to go. For lack of a better term, I'm grateful to have done that. It was so hard, but you know what? I survived, and I have moved on, and I'm sure that he's happy, I'm happy, and it was just us two ships passing the night to propel us where we needed to go. But that is probably the biggest thing I look back on. Nobody wants to be divorced. I didn't want to be divorced, which is why it lasted so long. But it had to be done to give me the lessons I needed and get me to where I needed to go. So that is definitely one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, it's so good. Thanks for sharing that. So how do you think your upbringing, both of us were brought up Catholic both of us are Catherine. We were just comparing notes.
Yes.
I'm Catherine Sienna and you're Catherine of Portugal.
Right.
So how do you think that being brought up as Catholic informed who you are today, if at all, Catherine?
Oh, that's such an excellent question. I think, if anything, it instilled a lot of values. And I'm talking more about the upbringing versus the doctrine, because if I would not be a recovering Catholic if I felt that everything was completely copacetic with the Catholic Church. But there was something about just the values that delivered from the very beginning. And that kind of set the stage for me just growing up to be a decent, caring, empathetic leader, but also combat that a little bit to just keep pushing the boundaries too. How do you keep being better? One of my favorite things, regardless of how you feel about the Bible, whether you take it word for word or if you just see it as a book of just a bunch of great stories. But one of the things the stories I go back to a lot, which is a parable about how essentially everybody is given gifts. The master gives you gifts, and you have a choice of either growing those gifts or you have a choice of hiding your gifts. And I felt I was given a gift, and I have got to make it grow. And then when judgment day comes, if you will, I can say, looky what I did with what you gave me, versus somebody who says, you know what, I just protected it and I didn't do anything with it. And that could be money. You could just say, God, you gave me this money and I invested it, and now I have all these things. Aren't you proud of me? Versus someone said, I just put it in a hole, or I kept it in my pocket and I didn't do anything. So I love that story. If anything else, just because that's what I see in a lot of people too, is don't you see the gifts you have and what you could possibly do with that? And that was probably one of the big takeaways, if you will, from a religious upbringing, that I was like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense. So I've always really pushed myself, because I was like, I got this talent, I can't just sit on it. And that's why I like mentoring women too, is because I see a lot of that potential, and I'm like, I can see it. So my job is to help you see it too, and then help you to learn how to use it, because we all have something. We all have some talent that we're either sitting on or utilizing. And let's just take what we got and make it as big as possible.
Right. And the words that you described of the core values is decent, caring, empathic leader, and yet at the same time pushing the boundaries into the gifts that you were giving. Instead of hoarding them, they're here to be given, completely used and shared and given.
Yeah, I could be empathetic, but that doesn't mean you get to make excuses. I could feel for a person, and because I've gone through things too, I get it. But at some point, and that's done. That is the past now. What did you learn from it, and how are we going to build on it? And yeah, I'll be a ball buster on that.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Well, that's a person, that's what a leader is to be able to hold space, but then to see the light and the greatness in others and believe in them even when they don't believe them.
Yes,
I
yes.
bring this story up a lot with Brendan Bouchard, who's my mentor coach as a high performance coach. And I remember him looking, I'm like, dude, I'm going to be the top of your class. And I'm shaking his hand. And he looks right at me and he goes, I believe you will. I was like this. I swear to God, I threw myself back like I got thrown against the wall because I live my life believing in other people like that.
Yep.
And the fact that he looked me in the eye and said that he believed that I would do as I said changed my life.
Yeah, I can believe it.
Yes. And so that's why I bring up that story of your belief, Catherine, your work that you do, and the people that believed in you, and then vice versa, the people that we can believe in is really, I believe, a game changer, really, truly a game changer. So talk to me about the awards. Any of you who are just listening to this, I'm looking at Catherine surrounded by a bunch of awards. I want you to talk me through the one that means the most to you, if you don't mind.
Oh my gosh, probably. Oh, there's a couple. From a business standpoint, being on the Inc. 500 list was a bit of a game changer because that is something that little Catherine, little Kathy, would never have imagined to have happened. When she's back in McHenry, Illinois, and just making things out of cardboard, like I said, you're on the Inc. 500 list. So from a business standpoint, that is really the epitome of accomplishment. I have another one that is where I'm an influential CEO and it's basically like a woman of influence thing. And I was like, there's something to be said about having awards based on your company growth, about best place to work. But when someone tells you that you are influential, and I don't mean like an influencer sort of way because that word gets thrown around a lot, but I was just like really taken aback by that I am influencing people. That I think is a very powerful thing. And that one kind of struck me a bit because I was also seeing the other women that were receiving it. And I'm like, I'm with these ladies. That's crazy. But I was kind of living in that space. I was just like, dang, I guess I'm doing something really cool.
That's so powerful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations for that. And I would love it if you would touch on for me what your belief is on grit.
Oh, that's a great question because I do a podcast, The Secret Art of Business, that's based on this whole grit and the grindstone and that sort of thing. And I do believe that in order to succeed, you do have to have grit. And that also comes with having a really clear vision and really wanting it. If you really want something, you will dig in and you will make it happen. And I think about, if I talk to the men, think about like sports, for example, and it's nothing between you and that championship ring and you got the ball. And this one time you got to dig in and make it happen. That's grit. That's grit when you just I want this so bad. I'm going to figure out how to do it. Now with my podcast, grit is super important. Nose to the grindstone is super important, but also knowing that you have this whole right side of your brain that is creative and innovative and influential, and you have to feed that too. And sometimes between where you're standing right now and getting that field goal or getting across the finish line, it's going to take some innovation. It might take some creativity. It takes that vision. So if you are letting that side be dormant, you're not going to get to where you want to go. So don't think that if I just keep doing the same thing over and over again, I'm going to get to where I want to go. It's more than that. And we have to feed our creative side. And you could do that from anything like taking, like we get sometimes if you get stuck writing, so if I go take a walk, that's going to clear my head. And then I'm going to come back and finish what I was writing. That's what I'm talking about in its simplest form, and where we get our best ideas in the shower when we're not thinking about anything. We're not, there's no grit in the shower unless you're just, unless you are filthy. But, but that's those moments of clarity that you need to insert in your life continuously in order to fuel that grit. So know that and be respectful of yourself enough to know I need to sometimes, in its bare sense, have that glass of wine. I need to binge that Netflix series because I have to stop my left side from being basically burning out. And then I'm going to go back, and then I'm going to have such clarity and such drive and so many new ideas. That's what's going to get you to where you need to go.
That's so good. So you said grit plus success plus a clear vision plus you really got to want it, right?
Oh,
Which
yes.
I just wrote plus. That sounds like the formula for you. So what if people don't have a clear vision? And the reason why I say this is something that you and I talked about earlier is that your present self doesn't see what your future self is in many ways. And so our job is to believe that our future self has already succeeded or achieved what our present self can maybe not even imagine.
Correct.
So I think that's the challenge for most people is that they don't take steps, they don't build grit because they don't have the vision. And I think that's a problem. I think that sometimes you don't know what it is and you're not going to figure it out until you're taking right action on a daily basis. That's grit. Grit is taking the steps when you don't even know as sure as where you're going to go.
Yeah.
But I know I am more than this, says you.
Yep.
Going to the garage sales and hitting it and making sure that you can have what you want, right? Grit is saying, I know that there is more than this.
Yes.
There is more than this for me. And that's something that's difficult to communicate to a lot of people. What gets in the way? For men and women, Catherine, you've had tremendous success. You've had worked with hundreds, probably thousands of different people and influencing them. What gets in the way?
There are so many things that get in the way. And just to play off your example, when I take on a new person to mentor, for example, I feel it's like getting in the car. They're in the driver's seat. I'm the passenger seat. And I turn to them and say, where are we going? Are we just going to drive around? or do we have a destination in mind? And that helps them and sometimes they say, I don't know where we're going. I don't know what I can do. But there are so many barriers in the way. Sometimes it's just you think that you are only allowed to go so far. One of the things I will never forget is when my mom worked in a factory, and she worked on the floor, the blue collar roles, and an opportunity came up in the air conditioned area of the factory where all the white collar people were. I said, Mom, you should totally apply for it. You've been there for 10 years, exactly the job. And the one thing that she said to me was, oh, those jobs are for them, not for us.
Holy crap.
I know.
Dude,
but
that's so powerful.
I know. And I think that is a barrier for people, is that they see those other people or those positions be unobtainable, but they are. Those people were not necessarily born into those roles. Granted, there's a lot of people that are, but there's so many more that don't. It's the ones that see themselves, I want to do this one day. How many people do we know that started their businesses in a garage and then they ended up being billionaires? That it was a very simple start, and they just figured out, had the grit, had the vision of what they wanted it to be. And in some cases, even like with Amazon, there was no vision for what that became, but it was just like, let's just try it. Let's see if people and they've had a few things that have failed, but they just kept rolling with it, and they're taking over the world basically. But that's just like one example. There's many other smaller businesses that have done very similar things. And a lot of it is because I can't do that because that's for them and it's not for me. And I always ask the question, why not me? I want to be in that room. I want to be at that level. I want to be a CEO or whatever. And actually being a CEO was not on my radar at all. Like I said, I was just going as far as that art director role because that was where it topped out for me. And then this opportunity came up and I'm like, oh, what if I could be a CEO? But yeah, it's just about really exploring what could the possibility be. And there is a great exercise that can be done where you write down what your old story is, where you were, You write your news story, which is where you are now, but what is your next story? And if you could, and it goes back to that whole, if you could talk to your younger self, because if I talk to my younger self now, her freaking mind would be blown. And I'm sure she'd be very proud of what we've accomplished. So what does 70-year-old me look like, or 80-year-old me looking back at where I am right now and just, oh, honey, you don't even know how good this is going to get. So you start thinking, okay, what could that possibly be? Is it then I have the pleasure of traveling more or doing more things that I couldn't possibly imagine? Just put it on a vision board. Or if you're not a crafty sort of person, which I didn't think I was, but darn it if I don't do a vision board and everything comes true, sidebar, but write it down or put it somewhere so you're constantly looking at it and go, okay, that's my goal, because you'll forget. You'll get caught up in the everyday stuff. So just always keep in mind what that vision is. Might you fall short on some things? Possibly. Who cares? Take that off and put something else up.
Right, exactly. There is an evolutionary process.
But it is about really having that vision and changing your mindset of, I deserve this. I'm working hard like everybody else, and there's no reason why I can't have it. And I just got to figure out how to get there. That's the formula.
That's so good. Old story, new story, next story.
Yes.
Next. So what are you, if you were to summate, just to give people inspiration and next steps, what would you say? And based on the fact too that you're in this new chapter, actually, you're writing your next story right now in the midst of putting all the pieces together to write your bestseller. And what is that next story for you? And what would you recommend people do for steps to build their next story?
Fun fact is that I ended up selling my business after 20 years last June. And that has allowed me to get to that next thing, because I was starting to get a little bit bored with that. And the creative mind, that visionary mind it's idle and you have to think about other things. So I started going back into painting, and people started asking me about my story, my personal story, and asked if I would write it. And I thought, why not? So I felt I had a lot to share based on how I got to where I am. And I guess loosely thinking out things that I would want to do is, if I could have this be a bestseller, or actually, let me just change my own vocabulary. When this is a bestseller, I will be doing more traveling, more speaking engagements. I would love to be on just like television shows that talk about things that women can do to get ahead and things like that, be guests on podcasts and all that sort of thing. Just basically just spread the good word on how women can do this. Women always get put in a situation of where it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back when it comes to getting ahead in the world. And let's just be done with that. And a lot of it is just learning how to play the game, which is essentially what it is, and just getting ahead and staying ahead. If that would probably be, if anything, I would love to just take everything I've learned, good and bad, and bring hope and some sort of plan and vision to the women out there that are like exhausted or confused, or they don't think they're good enough or what have you. Guess what? You are. You can totally do this.
What do you think men have to teach women?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, and it's not all men, but the ones that I know that are really successful, and I think that, for lack of a better term, they just don't care as much as we do about a lot of things. A lot of guys don't care about what people think of them, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but they don't get so hung up on it. If they hurt someone's feelings or something, they're going to feel that, but for the most part, they're not even thinking about that. They're not thinking about all these little things. And again, this is not a bash by any stretch, but they don't worry about who's going to take care of the kids. They don't worry about the plans for things. They don't worry about the latest fashion. They don't worry about, guys have 2 pairs of shoes and 2 suits, and they can conquer the world. But women feel like they have to have a whole arsenal of clothes. That's not. What if you didn't? What if you didn't have that? And what if? And I don't mean this the way it sounds, but what if you didn't care every bit of the minutia of where your kids are and what they're doing and things like that? I think women need to learn that they can hire people or have people help them, and not be this warrior mother CEO at the same time, because guys don't think about that. They are just. If it came up, let's just say their wife got sick or their whatever, they would figure it out. But until then, That's not something that's keeping them up at night. You know what I mean? So
Right. Yeah, totally.
it's
It's
just,
a,
yeah, it's just how we think about things differently. And it's not good or bad either way. It's just how we're wired. And I think that if women started thinking a little more in that regard, they could get through a lot of barriers, I think.
yeah, I think it's unapologetic. Actually, I feel like this is
Oh,
an unapologetic
yes.
conversation because I read a study that men, if you said to a woman, well, she's wearing something, you're like, wow, that color doesn't really look good on you. And that shirt, and the woman will go home and she'll put that in the Goodwill box. You say that to a guy, and you let that shirt, dude, he's gonna be, what? I like this shirt. Ripped,
Right.
full, stained, it doesn't
Yep.
matter.
Doesn't matter.
And we have something to learn from men. So I think we need to be less apologetic about the lessons that women need to learn from men because men are here to mentor for us as much as we are here to mentor for
Absolutely.
men. And we
Absolutely.
cannot rise as warriors together as female energy and as masculine energy without honoring the gifts that men bring and mentor. I think it's just because I've been in the bodybuilding space. I have 5 brothers. I
Yep.
lost a brother. My brother was murdered, and my son committed suicide in 2017. So I believe that I have a deep commitment to honor the process of men. And
100%.
yeah, so that we can rise together. This is, you'll never hear me bashing men ever because
Me
imagine
either.
being,
It's just a different way of
yes,
doing things.
imagine being a
It's a
guy
different
right now,
mindset.
right? Yeah, it's like very confusing. And men can function in such this is the place where you talk about compassion and empathy is that you think about men can succeed in sex, in sports, and in business. That's all they got, peeps. That's a drag.
It's
That's
a simple
drag.
life. It's
Right. And
such a
so,
simple life.
right, but that's also society's pressure on them that if you have a conversation with a man, you ask him his opinion. I've done this where I've had conversations where I've asked a man opinion with his wife or his girlfriend right there, and she will answer for him instead of giving the guy time to process the question. And I'm like, I asked him the question. And so I think that part of this is honoring each other and giving each other grace and space to be authentically who we are, because I think
Absolutely.
that's the key to success.
Absolutely. And when you are living in that space, you're not going to get bogged down by a lot of the other things. You are going to let go of a lot of things if you just like, you know what, if I don't, this is me now, and I'm not going to be worried about that. It's so very liberating.
And so do you experience that?
Oh, I went through this whole transformation just being a CEO, and that when I first came on the scene, I had to have the look, I had to have the hair, and I had to have the outfit. And I did that for years. And then after a while, I was like, you know what, I feel like I've lost my personality in this a little bit. So then it all changed. And I started wearing my hair the way I want, which was a little bit this wild child curly hair. I am back to my all black as an artist look and some cool glasses. So I'm not wearing the pencil skirts, although I do got some pretty cool pencil skirts. But so it's not the traditional blazer and I am a CEO, take my photo, sort of thing. So it's definitely more me. And when I brought that image and I brought my personality, because my personality changed too, and that I could speak more authentically, that was a big game changer too, because I was then bringing my strengths, I was bringing my specialty, I was bringing the things that I knew, and people were, and especially men, so welcoming. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're on this board. I'm so glad you're in the room. And versus you're just constantly trying to be performing too much.
So significant. That's so huge. That's massive. That's huge. I'm so grateful that you shared that. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
You
welcome.
just want to give a little headline on what's going up with you, what's coming on in your next story with the audience, and where they can find you, Catherine.
Yes, definitely find me, follow me, rate me with the Secret Art of Business podcast. It's usually 20-minute conversations, super quick. It's definitely for the people that are a little shiny object syndrome going on. This is why I keep it short, because I'm like, I don't want to listen to something that's like a 2-hour podcast or something. So if it's good, that's great. But for me, it's just get to the point, and we really talk about that balance between left and right, and how if we use them together, it's going to propel us further. And that goes back to a lot to our authentic self too, because a lot of the things that we are super passionate about are things that we did as a kid. Because most of the people that I know that are successful are doing something, there's something that they did as a kid that they love doing that has now made them successful. So definitely tune in for that. A lot of great conversations. And then I have this book that I'm working on. It is about 80% done, looking for a publisher. And it is called The Rules of the Game for Women in Business. And it talks directly about how I got ahead by essentially not trying to work my cute little personality into the room, but I learned the rules of the game. And everything has a sports theme to it, ladies. I'm sorry, but
Nothing to
that is
apologize.
a
It's
language of
great.
business. And I
It is.
promise you, and there's footnotes for every term that I use. But once you are familiar with the terms and you throw those out there all willy nilly in a meeting, the guys pay attention, and people get ahead when people are paying attention to them. So this is about how you essentially get the ball, how you keep the ball, how you steal the ball, and you are playing the game, because essentially we're not playing by the same rules. We're somehow figuring out how to get in to the room, but it is not, that could be a lot easier.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's so great. Now I remember that triggered like one of our conversations that we had about this. So I think it's so powerful. It's fantastic. I appreciate that. Catherine, thank you so much for joining me on Master Your Life. I appreciate your story and your transparency, and congratulations on your success. And I look forward to being part of your next story in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. When we first started talking, we totally felt our alpha female. We're like, we're going to be best friends. I can tell.
Exactly.
So
I
thank
got
you
your
so
back.
much. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to all the viewers and listeners of Master Your Life. Remember, you have greatness within you and wonderful opportunity to write your old story, write your new story, and then at the same time, create your next story. And we're here to support you every step of the way. Take good care, everyone, and be well. And remember, life is short. Play hard, stay gritty, and enjoy the ride.